Hey, I'm making this video to have a look at an article that Tone Deaf wrote up. It was about women in the music industry, specifically in Australia. The article takes a look at both sides of the argument, although it didn't really offer a conclusion or any kind of real wrap-up of information. It just kind of dropped it out and then left it. So I'm making this video just to kind of go through all the facts that it put down, look at contradictions that were made, and basically look at what can be found in it that is definite truth. Number one thing that I kind of want to take issue with is the title. I understand that publications need titles to kind of bring people in to read it, but it's really annoying when it seems to give you the answer before it even asks the question. So this article has the title, Aussie Female Musicians Say It's Harder for Women in the Music Industry. That seems to denote that there's a major collective and that it's a group thing, a majority thing, that everybody seems to agree on this. But then as you read through the article, it's not very black and white. It's very grey, and there's contradictions, and there's people saying different things. The three Australian artists that the article takes from to talk about are Megan Washington, Tina Arena, and Jenny Morris. I'll start off with Megan Washington. She brings up probably the most important part in the entire article. She says that the challenges faced by women in the industry are similar to that which they find in other industries, but she points out that artists get recognised for talent, not for sex. But it's when you start dealing with labels and publishers and booking agents, that's when the divide starts to come in. The reason why that's the most important part is that it immediately shows that there's two places. There's the public view of talent, which seems to be fine regardless of gender, and then there's the corporate world of the label, or any producers who are trying to help you get out there. I think another important part to point out about Megan Washington in this article is that towards the end, her opinion that the industry can get easier for females is shown. She sees that there's a positive step forward, and at least there aren't pop stars who are being overly sexualized like they are in America. So really, although she has voiced her concern, she's also taken it back by the end of the article. And next up is what Tina Arena is saying. Tina Arena talks about making it overseas while being based in Australia. She says how it's a very difficult thing for women to do. She seems to indicate this about the industry in Australia, that it's predominantly run by men, and that's why it's harder for women. You have to go overseas to make it. She gets backed up by musical commentator Glenn A. Baker. Now this is where I kind of get a bit... because based on what Glenn Baker's saying, I'll read the entirety of the Glenn Baker quote. He says, "Where's the evidence of females who have made it overseas while they've been based here?" And I'm thinking, there aren't any. History shows that to really make it overseas for a female, it's almost essential to go there and stay there. It's been very, very difficult for any Australian artist to make it overseas, but that's exacerbated if you are a woman. So there's a few issues I take with what he's saying. Firstly, what does he consider as made it? Because he's asking about females who have made it overseas, but what does he count that as? Does he count that as being able to tour through America? Does he count that as having an album on the charts? Because if he's only talking about the level of touring through America, or at least getting that kind of recognition, then I think you're going to be able to find a lot of holes. The first band that I think of recently are The Preachers. Female lead singer, they just had a tour through America. Or if you want to take it to a more instrumental level, then think about the Crooked Fiddle Band. You'd really say that their lead performer is female, and they've toured overseas multiple times. If he is talking about made it as meaning being on the charts and that kind of popularity, then sure, that's really damn hard. That's really damn hard for any Australian band. And on the second half of what he says, he points out that it is very, very difficult for any Australian band to make it overseas. Following that up with, but it's exacerbated if you're a woman. I feel like his language in that isn't right, because he's pointing out that it's very, very difficult for any Australian band, but then he still seems to point out that there's an issue with female artists being able to make it overseas. To me, it feels like you're saying, well sure, they're getting whipped, but we're getting caned. It really seems like a similar degree of difficulty, just with different aspects. Tina Arena goes on to criticise the amount of female Australian artists that get played on commercial radio, and that's a point that's also backed up by Jenny Morris. And this is something that I completely agree with. When I've listened to commercial radio and they have the time when it's given in the hands of the public and they say, you tell us, you request what you want to hear, that is usually the most interesting time to listen to the radio, because you hear so much that they would never play. And that doesn't just include female artists, as B-sides and all different kinds of stuff, but that's separate from this. Stay in the moment. Jenny Morris points out of how there's a very big interest in vintage male acts like INXS, AC/DC, Midnight Oil. And although I agree with all of that, I kind of wonder if there's maybe a different thing going on. A lot of commercial radio, they rely on hosts that aren't exactly musically... what's a good word that doesn't just insult them? Varied. No, that's not right. Musically affluent? Yeah, I think that's getting close. Musically, they have no real knowledge. Yeah, they're dumb. They get hosts based on personality, they don't get them based on their musical knowledge. That's all probably set up by some behind the scenes person who wants like very specific track of what to play over and over and over again. This could also be why things like community radio have started to rise in popularity in recent years, is because you have hosts who actually know about music and they want to show you the new music. So although it can be easy to just look at mainstream radio and say, oh yeah, it's all male, that's why they just pick all the male music, there can be other sides to it. Things get run like a business, and the worst thing about things getting run like a business, they'd rather just play the same 3 bands over and over again instead of really looking for anything new, or even anything that was good that used to be. Just thinking of a couple older bands off the top of my head, it would be awesome to hear much more things of like Killing Heidi or Little Birdie just on the radio. But you don't really get that. Is it because they didn't bring out enough albums at the time? Did they not make it? The final section of this article looks at the ARIA Awards, where Music New South Wales Executive Officer Kirsty Brown, she counted up that there were 18 women nominated across 27 categories in the recent 27th Annual ARIA Awards. But her tally is only focusing on solely female artists. If it's a female artist as part of a band, they weren't included. So she left out bands like Big Scary, San Cisco, and The Preachers. And speaking of The Preachers, their lead singer Isabella Manfredi, she said that while the condition of women in the industry is a vast and complex issue, that it's not as dismal as some people are claiming. And I feel this is important because I see her as representing the modern day female artist. And if you consider Megan Washington as part of the modern day female artist, even she said that things are getting better and that things are on a right track. And if you look at the previous generation of female artists, which I feel in this article are represented by Tina Arena and Jenny Morris, from their quotes, they don't concede at all. They seem very all in on the fact that there is a dire problem, without really looking at how things are getting better or how they're progressing. Isabella Manfredi talks specifically about the ARIAs. She was saying of how the last couple years have been really big for female artists. She points out how Kate Miller-Heidke, Sarah Blasko, and Lisa Mitchell all performed at the ARIAs. Megan Washington won Best Breakthrough Artist, and they are also the solo female artists, not the ones who are attributed with the band. So I feel that sure, most recent ARIAs, the nominations may be a bit lacking on females compared to all the other years, but is that really a bad thing? Does every single year the number of women nominated have to reach a certain level or constantly improve for it to be okay? Each year of nominations are really indicative of what's happening in the scene, who's really rising, who's not done much in a while. If that means that there happens to be more men who have put out work in that year, then so be it. That's just what happens. Next year there might be a lot more females who get nominated because they're the ones who have put in the work in that year. When it comes to the talk about the ARIAs and the amount of women nominated and the amount of female artists that get played on the radio, it almost seems like people want to push for a quota of female artists that can get played, or almost put in legislation or law that says that you have to reach a certain level of female artists. And while that may seem fair, I kind of want to offer a bit of a counterpoint. If you give people a quota for female artists to include in nominations or in airplay, then you're not going to get the best of the best. You're going to have filler. You could end up with a male artist or even a band that has a female in it, not getting a nomination or not getting airplay because they aren't a solo female artist who don't make up that quota. And that's just unfair. The most important part to figure out is who is in charge of all of the decision making. Who is on the board of people who decide who get nominated or who get played on the radio? Do they really know their stuff? Do they actively want to go out and look for new music? Because that's what's going to change it. Even just looking at the Sydney scene myself, I can find a myriad of amazing female bands, whether it's a solo artist or a band that has a female in it. They are out there and they are awesome. All you need is the right person wanting to show it. And you need to get rid of the people who would rather just stick with what they know, or the ones who will just pick a random female band just because it's female and makes up some kind of like gender equality issue. Because they're not going to fix the inequality that happens around the music in the industry. It's just going to cause more bands, male and female, from not getting the right opportunities. So, a final kind of conclusion to this tone deaf article. I feel that the most important thing to take away from this is that yes, there's obviously been problems in the past, and we may still be at a shifting point, getting rid of the old and bringing in a lot more of the new minds. But it is improving. It's getting better. More people are getting noticed. Numbers may fluctuate year to year, but with the right people in the right positions, you're going to have more people finding these bands. And you're going to have more people pushing to hear these bands. For radio, find and hire the radio host who will actually go the extra mile to find new music, male and female, just because they sound fantastic and they want people to hear it. Because as this article pointed out, people look for talent, they don't look for sex. If they hear a band on the radio who sounds awesome, whether they have a female singer or not, they will still be awesome. is just needing to get those kind of people in those positions in the first place. So, I hope that really helped what I kind of set out to do. I kind of hope it did. Giving a bit more cohesion to the whole article and picking out the points that are really important and trying to push out the things that are there more for an emotional rise rather than looking at the way the world might be in this modern day. And I also want to know your thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm an absolute moron, dickhead, who doesn't know what he's talking about? Let me know in the comments below, or on Facebook, on Twitter, on Tumblr, wherever you want to join. Spark up a discussion and let's see where it takes us. Be good.